And it still has your name on it.
All right, good evening, everyone. It's about 7:02. So we'll get started. I'm Tony Souza, Superintendent of Schools. Thank you for joining me this evening. Round two of our open Zoom, just to have conversations about our facilities and share ideas and ask questions or provide feedback. I will let you know, one of the things I did do for this evening is disable the chat feature just because I felt like last Tuesday, when I had my last session, or Thursday, I guess it was Thursday night, I was trying to follow along chat plus what people were asking questions. So I thought it'd be easier just to kind of disable that and then have everyone, if they have comments, to be able to share those comments. I am recording our session this evening. You'll notice that on your screen. So I will be sharing this with the community and also posting it. Hopefully by now you saw on our website the upgrade and refresh that we did, that there is a under the quick links section for referendum. And if you click on that, you'll have access to all the presentations I've done so far, as well as these video recordings. And this one will be going there as well. So I just kind of wanted to start out first before I kind of open up the questions. I'll just share and provide a few updates on some things that have occurred since the last time I had an open Zoom meeting. So first I'll start off where last Friday I actually had a meeting, myself and our architect, with a company that does modular construction. So one of the things that we've been looking at is Obviously, what would be any cost savings, for example, for a new building to build it traditionally, obviously on site, compared to what it would look like if we decided to go down the road of a modular. So realize in the state of New Jersey, Department of Education, there are specific guidelines that we need to follow with any contractor that we utilize. They have to go through a process to get vetted out in order to bid on jobs. So right now, for the state of New Jersey, for modular construction, there's only about 4 companies that actually are registered and able to get involved in school projects. There's other companies that perhaps might build privately, but there's only 4 that actually can get involved in school business. So we did meet with them on Friday for about an hour and just talked about some ideas of projects and found out a little bit more about modular construction, what it would entail. And when you're building a school, what are some things that they could do off-site and bring in modularly? And then what are some things that obviously couldn't do? So we had conversations like, for example, classroom spaces, even a cafeteria space. Those are things that they could construct off-site and bring in. Things like a gym is something that they would not be able to do, and that's something that they would have to build on-site. So at the end of the day, at least with this company that we worked with, we might see some savings compared to traditional construction, probably minimal. The biggest positive to going down that road is time. So what the contractor told us is that compared to traditional construction, you probably might save up to 30 to 50% in time of how long the project actually takes. So 30 to 50% quicker the project would take. Sorry, you might have heard my dogs in the background. 30 to 50% shorter in a modular construction compared to a traditional construction on site. So it's something we'll continue to investigate as we move through the process. But we at least wanted to start the conversation to kind of get an idea of what our options were. From there, a few other things that I wanted to point out. I mentioned last week that I was planning on taking a visit to the Jesus School in Lambertville. And I did do that yesterday afternoon. Myself and Principal Quinones had the opportunity to tour the building. We were there for about 45 minutes. We met with their director of facilities, so we were able to see all the different floors in the buildings or in the building, the different classroom spaces, and have a conversation about whether or not they would be interested in working with us if we went down the road, obviously, of a renovation of LPS and had to relocate our students. So what I will say on a positive note is they are interested in working with us. They absolutely would be on board with supporting perhaps housing our students for up to a year or so. And we felt like Principal Quinones and I that quite honestly, facilities there would meet our needs based on what we need. I didn't realize first time I had been in there, they actually have on their bottom floor a multi-purpose room that holds about 300 people with a working kitchen. So when we talk about things like lunches and things along those lines, it definitely would meet our needs. So we're going to extend the conversation further to get a little bit more details as far as what they would be looking for us to utilize the space. But that was a positive, knowing that that is a possibility if we go down that road, to relocate our students while a renovation would be taking place. A couple other things, the weather's kind of breaking a little bit, although today wasn't the best. It was cold again, but some of the snow is melting. So tomorrow afternoon, we will be walking our campus at the middle school and the high school with our well contractor to identify a location to actually drill a test well. I'm really going to try to push to try to drill that test well before our board meeting on the 22nd. I can't make any guarantees that really will be up to our well contractor, but it would be wonderful if we were able to get some of that information for the board meeting. The other thing is one of the properties that's been brought up as something to investigate is the church property located on 518. So I do have an appointment with our architect to visit that site on Friday this week. So I'm going to have an opportunity to kind of tour the inside of the building, the land, see what it's all about, see if for whatever reason, let's say we didn't get a positive well test and we needed to look at another space for a possible building. is that a possibility? Could that suffice down the road? So we'll have a better handle on that. As we continue to move forward, kind of vetting out the most recent option that was presented with the renovation of LPS and a new 5-8 building. So I will let you know that at our March 22nd meeting, I will do a pretty extensive slide deck presentation that will include, what the renovation would look like, including the new square footage. Hopefully I'll have renderings of what it would look like. I would have renderings of what a new 5-8 building would look like. I will have costs as far as how much the cost would for a renovation and for a new 5-8 building and the tax impact as well. So, all the things that I kind of laid out when we were talking about the first option of the combined school. So hopefully I'll have as much detail as I can in reference to that particular plan and kind of what that looks like. I did talk last Thursday about surveying the community and some different options for surveying the community. I do intend on doing that, but I'm going to wait till after the March 22nd meeting, just when there's more details out about our most current plan. I have reached out to a vendor that I spoke with last week about the possibility of doing a mailing. So one of the challenges that was brought up is how do we truly get the attention of our community members that don't have students in our schools. What I would like to do is, in having a conversation with the vendor last week, is I would send out a postcard to each resident, each mailing address resident in all of our communities, letting them know that we're putting forth a survey to get some input from them about our facility projects. And they would really have two options. It would be an online option where they would actually get a link where they could go in and fill out questions online. I don't see the survey being any more than 5 to 10 questions because I don't want it to be perceived as something that's too time consuming. And then the second option would be where they could actually call in to a phone number and we would have someone housed in my office that would take the responses to the questions verbally. So for any of our folks that maybe aren't on social media or not interested in using a computer or the internet, they would have the option to call in and provide responses to the survey. So that is something we're working on. And obviously our hope would be that we would hit all facets of our community with that. So that's kind of where I am just as an update from, I mean, honestly, we've accomplished a lot just within the last almost week, of different things of kind of where they are. And obviously by the end of this week, I'll have more information and really be able to vet it and get into specifics, much more specifics at our March 22nd Board of Education meeting. So at this point, I'm going to kind of open it up and we'll use the same process we've used in the past. So everyone is on mute. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. And then obviously I'll ask you to speak and share. As I mentioned, if anyone came on late, I did disable the chat feature just because sometimes it can be challenging following along with what someone's saying verbally and then also watching the chat when people ask questions and then I miss things. So I'd rather just have folks ask questions or provide feedback or responses or ideas rather than trying to manage both platforms at the same time. So I will open it up and I will start out. Jen, go ahead. Looks like your hand's up.
Hey, Tony, for the test well, can you share, I mean, you don't have to do it right now, but could you provide me the name of the company that's doing the test well? And also, once you guys settle on the site location, could you shoot me an email and kind of give me an idea where that's going to be? And sure. What's the, I mean, I could Google it. I don't want to waste your time, but what's the main difference between a test? I'm sorry if this is a stupid question, a test well versus a fully functioning well. What, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So typically they'll drill and then over a period of time, could be up to 24 or 12 to 24 hours, they'll run the well just to see gallons per minute. And then eventually what they would do is cap it, or if they don't find any, they don't really have to worry about capping it. But and then from there, they provide us a report based on their findings to say, this is how much we generate in this amount of time. And this is what you can expect per minute out of that well.
I see. So it's like a temporary well that would
Correct.
like function and get water and then, got it. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. No problem. All right, I thought I saw another hand up, unless it went down. Other hands or other feedback or questions or comments? Andrea Little.
I figure I'll be a team player here.
Okay.
So West Amwell Township, I had a question for a follow-up from the last meeting last week.
Sure.
So there were some demographic projections, a screenshot that I know you're going to discuss at the March meeting
Yep.
for the board. So I was looking at those numbers and they were K through 8. And I was comparing them to the numbers that were on the county superintendent's site of current enrollment, which may be different because of kids that chose homeschool,
Right.
for sure. The question I had for the demographic study, and I know you'll probably go through it, but does that include our choice population within their demographic study?
It
I'm
does.
presuming it, oh, it does, because
Yeah.
it's not our actual residents within our community
No, it includes,
that you're sharing that.
yes, it includes the choice numbers as well that we currently have and are projected to have. Unless the state of New Jersey decides to increase the amount, which would help us with additional seats, but we haven't heard anything about that, so.
Right, but we're not building a new school for choice. That's the purpose of choice, is to fill an empty seat. Is that correct?
Could be a multitude of things. It doesn't have to necessarily be fill an empty seat. It also could be able to provide diversity to the community as well, based on our community demographics and what we look like. So there's a lot of different positives in the choice program.
Well, I'm not talking about the positives or negatives. I'm just talking about us building a school and the finances that go into building a school. And the intent is to build them for our current population and our future population. And when there's open seats, that's where choice
That's
fits
correct.
in. I mean, that's how it was originally, put out there to the state anyway. Because I believe it's, we get funding about
Yes.
$11,000 per student, but with these kind of, I guess I don't want to see us building a school with population that is not necessarily within our district, to make sure that people are clear about that.
Yep.
Because it adds to the numbers for sure. So
Correct. And
if I look at that number and I compare it, it looks like it's an 11% decrease in population for current to 2024, it goes down.
correct.
That seem about right? Okay. That's
Yeah.
why I was wondering if it was like that 10% choice program that may have been inflating our current numbers, but you're saying they're
Yeah.
apples to apples.
And when I, after the board meeting on the 22nd, I'll release that full report. It's about 60 pages long, and it really, we also did beyond the demographic study, we also did kind of a home analysis, because we don't have a lot of building in our community, and haven't had a lot of building in our community. So we decided not only to do the demographics, but also look at turnover rates for properties and resale, and kind of what that trend looks like over the last 20 years. And once people
Mhm.
move in, how long do they stay, and kind of what that all looks like, just to kind of get an idea of that as well, since we haven't had a lot of building in our community.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other questions or comments? There's got to be more than just two. Let's see. Michael Strauss, go ahead.
Hey, Tony. So you said that you were going to survey the church property with the architect. I'm just wondering if you have discussed any other properties with them, and are planning to make any other future visits.
We're going to start with this one. I think I had mentioned last time that obviously the West Amwell property that was mentioned behind the municipal building is not. So that is one that we did vet out in the beginning of the year. maybe like September, but found out that unfortunately it would not be available to us. We looked at ESC property in the past. There's some challenges there. So at this point, we'll look at the church property on Friday, and then depending upon what that tells us, see and make a decision on whether or not we want to investigate anything else.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, Erica.
Sorry, my dog is attacking me as I tried to unmute myself.
That's okay.
I just only have the comment. I just want to thank you for actually looking at that church property, because I think I've been saying it for like 7 years. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
problem.
Can't wait back.
No problem. Jen.
Just figured why not. I mean, you don't have a lot of hands raised now.
I know.
How do we have an idea, or maybe this will be part of forthcoming surveys, but maybe you already have information that you've looked at. Do you have a gut sense or any information that gives you an idea of what total number a taxpayer would be more likely to be able to digest? Because I guess as we kind of spend a lot of time and providing all this feedback and having lots of good conversations, kind of when I go to sleep at night and run through things in my head, a little voice in the back of my mind always nags, God, but who is ever going to really, truly push that ballot, number to say, yes, please increase my taxes. I think that a lot of what, the voices that I surround myself with obviously are parents, because that's my community. But yeah, like what are the numbers in your mind? Anything that you can tell us about what's the taxpayer really going to be able to absorb?
Being quite honest, probably they don't want to absorb anything if you ask folks, right? But my hope would be is once we settle on a plan, then it's my job to kind of get out there and educate them on the value of the plan, and also show them that here's some money that hopefully by going with the plan that we'll be able to save down the road in future budgets, whether we're able to, kind of consolidate, reduce staffing, whatever we may be able to do, to perhaps reduce our annual budget numbers to be more fiscally responsible. That really is what it comes down to. And then down the road from that, like obviously if we do nothing, we could really throw in, good money at bad money. We're trying to do things just to keep the buildings up and running that honestly, if something major went wrong and we had to put a lot of money into it to keep the buildings up and running and we didn't have a plan, that probably wouldn't be good either, because obviously that impacts the taxpayer. So, showing them the options, saying, hey, this is how much it's going to cost, but this is how much we can save. This is the educational value for our kids, hoping that they recognize how important education is. And honestly, like I've had some Zooms with folks so far that live in our communities that don't have kids in school that have reached out to me and have heard about what we're talking about. What they've said to me is they've actually been very, very forthcoming and said, if you present a reasonable plan that makes sense for our kids and is going to give them a better education, I would support it. But it has to be something that I consider to be reasonable, and it has to be something that makes educational sense. And that's something that'll be my job when the time comes to really be able to show them that.
Right. Okay. And real quick follow-up. The demographic study, does that at all look at economic factors to kind of give you an idea of where there may be people who physically would not be able to afford, not that they don't want to spend money on education, right? But really, talking about a $500-$600 or whatever increase to their cost in a year, they wouldn't be able to afford it. And just to give us again that information of where we stand, does the demographic study kind of give you any of that information, or is it more just about population?
It's more just about population,
Okay.
and it does show not only school enrollment wise, but it will show details as far as each community of what their overall populations will look like in the next 5 years. And then it even projects out to think it's 2030, 2040, kind of like where things are going.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Lindsay. Lindsay, you can go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I had it on double mute. Sitting here in the car, wrestling practice, had the phone muted and the car muted too. Sorry. This is Jamie. So real quick, follow up to that point on the tax portion of it, as someone just mentioned. Obviously, this has got to be sold to the residents so that it passes via the referendum. So always with that in the back of the mind, and doing what's fiduciarily correct by the taxpayers, what makes the most fiscal sense, and the best spending of the dollars. So back to a question that I asked the last time that we had this meeting. So it's clearly been deemed really not viable to do the new build of a combined school on the Lambertville property. Just going with the renovation there, obviously the 40% pull through on the renovation cost and things potentially on the West Amwell property. But since it was presented again that the most cost efficient would be just one building, and pending the results of this well test, if it comes back that that's a viable location for a new build, wouldn't it suggest that the best and most again fiduciary the best responsibility from publicly elected officials would be to build a new school, combined school on the West Amwell property? So the question is number one, that. Number two, will you at least put together, or can we at least put together what those numbers look like? And could we maybe even assume that the numbers that were originally put out for the cost of the combined school with the original proposal would be probably close to the same? So those are my two questions.
Yeah, and I'll follow up. I would assume that they probably will be close to being the same. So from my perspective right now, I'm really interested in kind of vetting out our current proposal to see where that falls and what it looks like compared to those numbers. And that is the renovation LPS and then the new 5.8 building. So I think in our back pocket, we do have some ideas of what a combined school would look like. Honestly, no matter where it is at this point, because we already kind of vetted out those numbers. I mean, there might be some little nuances. It could be a change here and there, but I think it's going to be fairly close.
So if it comes back that the costs for the renovations are indeed more expensive than a complete new combined build, and we already have those numbers, is this something that we would revisit and come back to the taxpayers and say, hey, listen, here's the whole progression of the conversation. We thought this didn't work out for these reasons. We've edited this out. We find via the well. I mean, obviously this is all dependent on a lot of things, a lot of factors. Everyone understands that, but is it something that you and the board would be at least willing to commit to revisiting in the future if the numbers are favorable towards the taxpayers?
I think it's always a possibility. I'm not going to speak on behalf of the board, but I'll speak on behalf of me. I think at this point, I'm just going to be 100% honest. I like the plan that I have on the table right now. So I got to vet it out and look at numbers and kind of see where we go. I think it gives everybody a little of everything. Once we have more information, within the next 3 weeks, we'll probably have a better idea on what direction we need to go.
So one more follow-up question, then I promise I'll stop asking questions.
Okay.
So what if the taxpayers say no? What if the taxpayers not unanimously, but overwhelmingly say, well, Anthony, we disagree with you. We think that this is a bad option. We think that it's very expensive. We don't think that it's the best solution for a combined, school district. We vote this down via the referendum. So knowing that, as you said, just the need to build a new school because of the condition of both current schools, what then is going to be the course of action that could follow if we put out a solution that the wise taxpayers can see through, thinking, hey, this is not a wise use of my tax dollars. We need to vet out better options, i.e., a combined school that makes more sense. So what would be the play at that point?
We need to change the solution and then go back out. So it could very well be the solution that you just talked about. But at this point, I think we have a viable solution on the table. We got to look at numbers yet. If we were to go out and the voters say no, then obviously we know they're not going to support that. And then we have to come up with another solution that they perhaps would support. So, and we can do that, within a couple months, or depending upon the time frame. It's not like we have to wait a whole nother year. Obviously, it's beneficial to go out in November, as I mentioned, because we don't have to pay for the referendum. But we would have to go back out with a new solution and see what kind of results we got. Michaela.
Well, I was actually just trying to unlower my hand through your chat with Jamie. You kind of touched on a lot of the things that I really wanted to inquire about. And I guess I will ask the question, but the impact, the implication of this not passing referendum, whatever the course of, plan may be, that impact is not going to be the first time we've had it, right? I mean, this conversation has been happening for 10 years? Someone
Yep.
please correct.
Yeah,
And probably long before that. And I really, to kind of chime into where Jamie Legg was referencing, I've talked to my parents, to other people in this community, and they have that same sentiment of, I will pay whatever we need to as long as the dollars go to academic viability, as long as it's to the betterment of the community, as long as it's attracting and retaining quality community members that have a like-minded devotion to education, right? I mean, you have to assume people move here for a few reasons, right? It's rural, it's lovely, et cetera. But with the likes of Hunterdon Central and the Bucks County school systems that are much larger and offer significantly more opportunities, people come here because they want a particular experience, right? So how do we make sure that we still make it appropriate for them, enjoyable for them, and affordable for them? Not to mention that we have people on fixed incomes, as we know, right? So I think the community will get behind this when we have a plan. I'm reassured by the fact that you just said, I'm behind this plan. I kind of like this plan. I think this is a good plan. That feels very good to me. And I want to understand a little more about that. But we've got to be very clear that we're going to have to compel an entire community with academic value. And I think whatever presentations come forth from this, yes, the wells, yes, the demographics, yes, all of that, but how does this better our academic value? Because our school is a huge part of this community. So to Jamie's point, if we get these numbers and we find out that the one school is indeed better for the, K-8 or however we structure it, I think it's going to be really important that we as a community support the decision and compel our neighbors and understand and be compassionate to their positions, because we have to vote this together, because for the love of God, our kids need it. Our teachers need it. The future of our part of Hunterdon County needs good schools. So that's it. I was trying to put my hand down because I was going to ask about the referendum, what happens, but I figured I would chime in a few extra minutes anyway. As always, I'm grateful to you for creating the space for us. I'm grateful to our community for showing up and, coming forth and trying to find solutions. So let's just keep it that way.
I agree. Thank you.
You got it. Have a good one.
You too. Rebecca.
Hi, Rebecca Smith Casey in West Amwell. I have, I guess, two questions. My first question, I guess, goes to the long-term sustainability of the LPS property if a renovation is done. It's a 50-year-old building at this point. So can you speak a little bit about sort of the renovations that are expected and what the long-term expectation would be of kind of maintaining that property for another, say, 30 years under a referendum, thereby making it an 80-year-old building? And then my second question, I guess, is what's sort of our worst case scenario if the referendum doesn't pass and then a referendum doesn't pass because the community is not able to sort of come together on something, what sort of are the long-term implications of that? Is there a point at which the state steps in and says, listen, we're done playing with you guys. You all need to get your stuff together? Or does it just turn into the district being able to sort of strong arm and say, well, then we're paying for all of these repairs, and the inevitable lawsuit that's going to come related to the non-ADA compliance of our building?
Yeah, so I'll answer the first question first. So the first question, honestly, like with LPS, here's what I'll say, like it's the building's good bones, right? The building, and our architect will be the first one to tell you that, it was built the right way. It just wasn't necessarily configured the right way, or it was configured for a time that was much different than what we look at now as far as 21st century learning. So if we do a full renovation with that building and, replace HVAC, and we put a new roof on there not too long ago, so that roof is in really good shape, only a few years ago, between HVAC and going through each classroom and doing all the ADA accessibility and redesigning that building, we could make it into a new innovative space. Full disclosure, I came from a district that had 2 of its 6 schools that were over 100 years old, and were amazing buildings because they were maintained the right way, and obviously upkeep and renovated at some point, and really amazing, beautiful buildings for the communities. So it can be done, and if the infrastructure wasn't good, then that would be a whole different story of, gee, we don't really have a solid infrastructure to work with. It's not much different if you've renovated a house to say, the house has good bones, but obviously I'm going to change it around and remove walls and open it up and do all different things. We can take a similar approach with LPS as well. And the benefit of that is with the renovation, we also get a considerable amount of funding from the state to be able to do that. Now, what happens if we, strike out with the referendum, and how many times can we strike out? Well, basically if we strike out 3 times, we do have the ability to kind of go to the state and plead our case to say we need help. So we've tried everything we possibly can from our taxpayers. They haven't supported us in all the different proposals. Is there anything else more you can do to help us, to help provide some additional funding for our projects? So there's no guarantees with that, but it is an option. Obviously with that, it takes time, because the longer you go out, when you're doing 3 different referendums, you're talking probably at least over 1.5 years for that all to happen. And then the clock continues to tick as far as when you're going to reap the benefits of those projects. So there is an option at the end of the tunnel. It's not a guaranteed option, but we could go back and try to, plead with the state to say, we're in a really difficult situation. We have failing buildings. We can't get our taxpayers on board. What can you do to help beyond the 40% that you're already going to contribute for the renovation? Michael.
Hi again. So let me just, I first, I enjoy listening to this discussion, both what Jamie had to say and also Michaela jumping onto it. And some things just really resonated with me in there, and something that you actually just said as well. But I want to harken back to last week, and it was something that Andrea Little said, and I don't know her, but I kind of wish I did now, because she used either the word exemplary or extraordinary, and that our kids deserved extraordinary schools. And if we're going to do it, let's do it right. And Jamie, said that combined school, it was in Lambertville, the first one that was put out there. That did not necessarily make me super happy, but I will tell you the bells and whistles of it. The what was possible in that building was really important to me. And I was willing to swallow the location and the possible pitfalls, because like Michaela said, I feel like the community is going to get behind something that's going to be an academic benefit for our kids. And you just said that LPS wasn't built for 21st century learning, and that it's possible to do a redesign in that. I'm just wondering, like, in this current plan, are we looking at two exemplary buildings, or are we just kind of like looking at two buildings? And if that's what we're looking at, how really are we going to sell it to taxpayers? Like I'm really sold on the combined building. So I see a lot of benefits with it.
So I think honestly, at this point, the only way you're probably going to be able to make a true judgment is after you see what they might look like. So the hope would be that we'll be able to provide a lot more detail of renderings on March 22nd. And then from there, you can kind of make your own judgments to say, because I think one of the benefits that we did have is when we showed some of the flexibility in the combined school in Lambertville, and with overflow spaces and the maker space and all the different things, special ed, small group setting rooms, like I think that went over well. And the hope would be that these designs would be able to do the same thing. But until, like anything else, we can talk about it, but until you see it, then you're going to have to kind of judge for yourself and say, you know what, this is going to be good for our kids. This is something that's going to be meaningful for our kids. And I like what I see. So I would just say at this point, let's wait to the 22nd. And that's one of the reasons why I decided that I wouldn't survey until after the 22nd, because I wanted for folks to be able to see all of that first, and then from there provide input based on what they saw, including not only what it looks like, but the cost and all those different pieces.
Okay, but as long as that's what we're looking for, because in
I'm
the
not
original
looking-
proposal,
Yeah,
that
agreed.
those
Like,
two schools, the separate schools, just they didn't have the bells and whistles, and
They didn't. You're right.
the maker space and the library. You had me at library.
No, I know.
And I don't want to lose that in the rest of the discussion that's surrounding this, because at the heart of it, that's what we're looking for, is an exemplary and extraordinary school for our kids to go to.
I agree. All right. Jen.
Hi. I know everybody keeps bringing up such good points, so I keep having questions. I apologize. Talking about Lambertville, the building having good bones led me to a question of, in the original plan combined school, we were acquiring more property. So while Lambertville School, the good bones piece is being sorted out, and we're still providing some new educational space, what is the plan still for that in terms of parking lot and playground and that kind of stuff? So that was one question. I have a couple more. Do you want me to stay on, or do you want me to fire away?
But let me answer the first one first.
Okay.
So, I mean, we're looking at the parking lot as well as part of the design. If there's anything we can kind of do with that, I'm really going to break down for the 22nd. And, as far as staffing goes, how the numbers look based on the number of folks that would be coming into the building compared to the folks that would be exiting the building because of the 5-8, and kind of, share with you what that looks like compared to the amount of parking that we have now. Playground wise, I mean, that area is still owned by the city. So that's something, personally, what I'd love to be able to see, quite honestly, for the playground area. And if you're not familiar, behind the building on the other side, there's a preschool area, playground. I would love to see universal playgrounds. So if you're not familiar with what that is, that's a handicapped accessible with a rubberized material. So obviously, when we talk about accessibility, not only for inside the building, but if we ever had a student that was in a wheelchair that wanted to also participate in utilizing some of the space on the playgrounds, I'd love to see that as well. So where that plays out, how we can work with the community on that, I'm open to those conversations. I don't know if that would necessarily be part of the referendum. The preschool play area might, but I don't know if on the other side of the building, or the, like whether if it's a K, if we want to move the preschool, but But on the side closest where the basketball court is, probably that space could be, could use an upgrade across the board, not only with the playground area, but also with the basketball court area, which I know, needs some work as well. So I'm open to that, and whether or not maybe we could partner with the community on that and see kind of where we go, because obviously it benefits the community as well, not just the school.
Yeah, and I also always will keep in the back of my mind too, the things that we do at West Amwell today, like trunk or treat. And really our K to 4 students are the ones that really show up for an event like that. And yeah, if there's some way to provide renderings or show us what that could look like, for events and things like that, that would be great. And my next question is on funding. And again, I hope this isn't like a really stupid question, but outside of like the state, are there any other sources that we can look for, or I don't know, like any type of fundraising or grants or any of that other, like, or even if we could get parts of certain projects funded in different ways to help offset for costs to the taxpayer? Are there anything like that to look into?
There's possibilities depending upon the type, whether it's related to technology or different things, we might be able to get grants to help utilize with some equipment or things that we would have in the building. There's always those possibilities. Or if we had, some type of corporation that was willing to sponsor different things along those lines. There's, if there's money out there, we could always utilize it for different parts of the project.
Okay. And then my last question is, I know that West Amwell Township had faced some discussions around some land that potentially would have been sold to like developers to put housing and things on that, the township doesn't really want to have developments built on, but some of that land that was in question several years ago, I'm just wondering if that's come up at all, as that land was whoever owned it wanted to sell and repurpose that land back then, and it was for residential. Is there still an interest there in parting with that land? And, would it be? So I just wanted to throw that out there. And lastly, just because it's come up a couple times, I think in some old information that we had from the McKinsey study,
Yeah.
there was a number around something like they had estimated a savings of future costs, that if we didn't have to deal with Lambertville and West Amwell's issues, the schools, the buildings, it was something in the neighborhood of like an $8 million savings. So it was a pretty significant number. And I don't know if that information is still relevant or needs to be updated, but I thought that was a good number to have to share, with taxpayers and things like that. So I wanted to make sure that we're still looking at that information as well.
Yeah, and I think like from a funding side, just looking at our budget, if we wound up going, let's say with a K4 and then a 5.8, we would be in a similar situation with savings in our annual budget that we talked about with the combined school as far as reducing sections. So, we had estimated, around $500,000 in our annual budget, in staff savings by going from 4 sections to 3 sections. Obviously, when we renovate the buildings, our energy efficiency is going to be totally different than what it is right now. We do not have energy efficient buildings in either site. So obviously our energy costs are much higher than they would be when we take a look at sustainability and things along the lines that we'd be able to put in those buildings, LED lighting, switches that go off and on depending upon who's in the room, thermostats in each location that can be set at different times when the building's occupied, unoccupied. All those pieces would go into our overall savings in our annual budget on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, anybody else? Rebecca.
Hello, I have a question, I guess like a practical question related to our teachers and their certification, so that if restructuring occurs and we shift from an elementary and middle school, high school to a K4, 5, 8, 9, 12 system, or a 2-school model, or however it may be, are teachers going to need to get new certifications related to grade level instruction and things like that? And if so, is the district going to be able to support them in doing so in terms of classwork if necessary, or whatever the case may be, so that we're not putting our teachers in a worse position by factoring one system versus the other? Because I know a lot of us very much value the teachers that we have and that our kids have had.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at that now. We would support that. If anything, it really wouldn't be where they'd have to go back and get recertified in something else. Sometimes what it comes down to is literally just having to take a praxis test for a specific subject area. Quite honestly, the way I foresee it, we would have a similar setup that we have now, really with all the way up to K6. So even if it was a K4 building and then obviously a 5-8, I foresee K6 teachers doing what they're doing now, meaning that we do have some teachers in 6th grade and 5th grade in our model right now that are teaching multiple subject areas and are able to do that under their certification. I don't foresee that being a change. What I would like to see, though, is once we get to 7th and 8th grade, I really am a huge proponent of content specialists. So not necessarily teachers that are teaching multiple subject areas, like, for example, math and science or language arts and social studies. I really like to see that we have, a language arts teacher, a math teacher, a science teacher, and a social studies. I think it's important by the time you get to that grade level that we have content specialists. But if we did have a need, and the other thing too is depending upon, one of the things we'd have conversations with our teachers about is what do they want to do? I mean, we might have some folks that were teaching at one level that really had an interest or maybe had past experience at teaching at another. That would provide us an opportunity to see, and we might even have some high school folks who really, quite honestly, because they, the way our high school is kind of set up now, some of our folks are teaching a combination of middle school and high school. Some of our folks perhaps might want to be a full middle school person. So we would have to take a look at all those different options on the table and also, share with staff about what is their level of interest of where they would kind of like to see themselves land. Andrea.
Hello.
Hi.
So it's really good to hear what everyone has been saying. And I really do think that everyone here is looking for the same common interests, which is, better education, right? Regardless of what kind of building it's in, although beautiful things are always make us happy. And I bring this up because it sounds like your plan where you're narrowing in is doing a renovation with LPS and then building a middle school, it seems to be. You had mentioned before that a renovation, the state gives 40%. When we talk about a middle school, we're including 7th and 8th grade, which technically they already have a home at the high school. So they have space. We know our numbers are going down 11%, and that's including a program that we don't know that will exist at that point, which is choice. And I bring that up only because of space. But regardless of the numbers, the 3 sections are what everyone wants. Small classrooms and 3 sections allow for that. And there really is no need for 4 sections based on our current numbers, based on our future numbers. So that for sure is a great savings. And we'll also level out our education going into the 7th through 12th grade. So fabulous. I mean, no matter what, no one anywhere could ever say to you that is not good, right? Because that makes sense, whatever you want. I guess my question coming out here or statement would be, that's a lot to ask people to do a renovation plus build a school. So I think at some point, since we know 7th and 8th grade have a place, we need to put on the table renovating both schools. It's not necessarily what people want to hear, but we can break down, pre-K to 3 in West Amwell and put the older grades up at LPS or down at LPS, and then continue 7th and 8th at the high school. And make those schools great renovations, knowing we get support from the state on that, which we all pay for regardless. But I think that needs to be on the table, or building a new school. But I don't know how you can renovate one school and build a whole new school and get support, because it will be a huge financial upset that really, like, we're setting ourselves up to fail. Because I don't care how many people want great education, if you can't afford to live here, you're gonna have to move. So I would like to see maybe on the March numbers, that option, which was one option a couple of years ago when these talks were happening. There was going to be, LPS would be certain grade levels, West Amwell would be certain grade levels, renovate both of them, to do what we needed to do. I say the older grades down at LPS because of the fields, and also having stage, give them the media center that they need, library, everything, put it all out there. So that's from what I'm hearing from everybody. If I knock it all down, no matter what, we need to combine at grade level, but we need to do it financially well. And yes, I would love to continue having a spectacular school in education, and make our teachers happy, our students happy, that live within our community. So thank you. If you have any comments, that's great.
No, I do. I mean, the only thing I'll say is, and I think I said this last time, I can't say the same for West Amwell with the good bones. I'm just being honest, like looking at the building and what would need to be done. And I've had conversations with our architect about that. And I think honestly, and that's something we, perhaps could look at, but I think the numbers would be almost as equal to build a new school for that renovation. I mean, it's almost like a tear down. So,
Well, I mean, if we look at that school and you were looking to, just house pre-K to 3, there'd be plenty of space for them to spread out, put the music room back into the school, as far as, space wise. And then there's this, West Amwell has such a gorgeous scape around it for outdoor learning that can be utilized. So I know that there's, pipe issues, this, that, whatever. There's a fairly new roof on there. It's not that old. And, buildings were meant to last when these were built. So I think it's still worth exploring. I think people need to know, because to go out to people and say, oh, we're going to build a new school, and renovate one school, we should know what it's going to cost to renovate it. It's frivolous for us not to, frankly. I don't go out and say, I want to buy, a new whatever appliance just because, it's state of the art. If I can't afford it, I'm not going to credit card myself to debt. We shouldn't be asking the public to be doing that either, frankly.
Understood.
So thank you. I do appreciate it. I appreciate the sessions, because it's great to hear from a lot of different people in different positions, school in or out. I plan to live here for the rest of my life, to be honest with you. So I'm vested in this community and this county. I was born and raised, went to Central, went to amazing schools that, guess what? They were built in the 50s too. So, you know what I mean? And they're still standing. So.
Yep.
I'm not opposed to a new school, but it's got to be efficient, and it's got to, you got to pick what you want to do, and give options. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Brian.
Hey, Tony, quick question that you just mentioned with what Andrew was just talking about, the renovation of like West Amwell, and it costing just as much as building a new school. But if you renovate, you get, correct me if I'm wrong, help from the state and that 40% to renovate. Am I thinking about that correctly?
No, you're accurate. That's accurate.
So I don't know. That's just my comment, just to
Yeah, I mean, the only
clarify
thing we'd have to factor in is, and it seems like we have a viable plan for LPS right now for relocation. We'd have to figure something out for West Amwell where we would put the kids. And unfortunately, like if we did the LPS, full disclosure, if we do a reno there, I'm hoping we can do it within a school year, meaning summer, school year, summer. So not 2 years. And we would be in the school, the Jesus school for 1 school year and then be able to get back in the following year. For West Amwell, quite honestly, if we did like a major renovation there, I don't know if that would be able to happen in the same amount of time based on what we would need. Because not only would we be doing a major renovation and even maybe a rebuild, but also a major addition in square footage because of obviously the spaces that lack, like no gym right now really, and things along those lines. So in the meantime, we might have to, we possibly could have to put kids somewhere for 2 years, and trying to find out where that would be and what that would look like could be a challenge.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Colette. Hi, Colette.
Hi, sorry about that.
That's all right.
I have not talked on one of these, but I have a question. I'm at West Amwell right now. I've got 2 kids in the school district and my husband is a builder.
Okay.
And we are trying to understand what the major issue is with West Amwell and renovating. Because, I mean, we heard that, Lambertville was not renovatable, but now it is. What are the actual structural issues for West Amwell School?
Well, before we get into the structure, one of the biggest issues that you contend with and when we try to add on square footage is the septic system. The fact that it's right underneath, obviously, the back field there, but also runs underneath the back parking lot is a challenge if we want to try to add additions onto that building, which we would need to. Because right now, the gym is not really a gym. It's kind of a multi-purpose room that you can't even have classes or community events or anything like that. So that and the library and all that area that have to be reconfigured and expanded upon. And just the setup of the building, it wasn't insulated the proper way. And I would advise, I don't know if you've been following along, but if you go to the website under the referendum, that first presentation that I did that kind of details all the challenges with that building, the fact that it really was never.
No, I haven't seen that. Where would I find that?
So if you go to the website and, shrsd.org, and then there's under quick links right on the home page, there's a referendum tab. Click on that.
Yes.
Look at the January 25th presentation.
Okay. And that goes into the issues with West Amwell.
Yeah.
I could just see getting very creative, the front parking lot going to the back. You can put a parking lot on the septic. You could do other things on septic. You can move the playground over a septic. There's a lot that can go on that area and come up with creative buildable space. Just like Brian was just saying, I mean, the fact that the state would give 40% for a renovation would make me a lot happier as a taxpayer hearing, if I didn't have kids in the school system right now, I'd be horrified to hear that there's a renovation and a new school, and this in addition to what's going on with the tax base in Lambertville right now. The city of Lambertville just bought a $3 million property in town that's going to affect the tax base. The tax base has already gone up about $1,000 per household in the past year. We're going to price out people in the community who may not be able to send their kids here 2 years down the road when all of this goes through. So, I mean, I'm really concerned about the long-term people who've lived here who are not going to be able to afford it and how we're going to sell this to them.
Understood. I mean, one of the benefits that we do have is, and I had showed this in one of the presentations, is right now, quite honestly, West Amwell and I think Lambertville are one of the lowest tax base rates in the entire Hunterdon County. I think I had shared that list maybe at the February 1st presentation that's on the website. It shows that out of all of the different municipalities, I think Lambertville, Stockton, and West Amwell are in the top 4 out of the lowest tax rates in all of Hunterdon County. So that is.
Yeah, but we do live right next to the Delaware, where you can go across the river and pay half the tax base in most of the other municipalities. So you can lose people, and there are places for them to go.
Yep.
So I mean, the tax is continuing to go up right now. Lambertville is having a sore tax issue with a lot of what's going on, and compiling this on top of it is going to be problematic for a lot of the community.
Understood.
So, I mean, I would love to think more creatively about what we could do with West Amwell, even if we're combining the schools, break it down to 3 classrooms per grade and get more for our education.
Do you have any suggestions on what we would do with the kids?
From West Amwell? Well,
Yeah, we'd have to relocate them probably for 2 years while the project went on.
I don't know of a space in West Amwell at the moment.
No, I mean, the only option you would have, and this is something that I also had kind of laid out, is to bring in temporary classrooms. But it's not cheap. We actually, when we spoke to, I had mentioned in the beginning of the call, the modular company.
Yes.
Why I was on the phone with them, I asked that question about West Amwell and said, listen, here's about how many classrooms I would need. What are your thoughts on an estimate of price tag of what that would cost over maybe an 18-month period? And they estimated somewhere around $2 million. And that, because you have to remember, not only are you bringing in the spaces to rent, you need to provide water, sewage, electric, internet. Those are all.
Okay, so you said that Jesus School was viable to put Lambertville in during that renovation.
Correct.
Why do these have to happen back? I mean, why couldn't these be piggybacked and continue to use the Jesus School if busing could happen in their, I don't know if their parking lot would accommodate. Yeah, actually probably would. There's a turnabout.
Would. Yeah, it's pretty big. I mean, that's an option. It just delays the project. You know what I mean? Obviously, we're looking at, the original estimate I gave where, let's say the referendum passed in November, we wouldn't have shovels in the ground until probably August, September of 22. And then we were looking at about, 18 months. So that means that, let's say we did one building first, you probably wouldn't, let's say, maybe you start the second renovation in the 23-24 school year, maybe. If you were able to do a renovation, maybe in a year, maybe, 14 months with summers, or 16 months with summers, possibility.
I mean, if it works, if it's the most fiscal responsible thing, then I don't know why taking our time wouldn't be more viable than, spending more money on the tax base that we don't need to. If a solution can be worked out for the West Amwell site. I mean, we have beautiful grounds. It would be a shame to give those up, go to a smaller space and lose that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. All right, Michaela, we'll go back to you.
Hello again. So I have two things I want to kind of touch base with you on, and I'll chime in with Colette on the inquiry about West Amwell, and that it has been mentioned several times from several people over the course of this exploration to really vet out the West Amwell property, whether it's in a renovation or rebuild. So in this conversation, my first question is, I saw the plan, I saw your site map, I saw the issues with West Amwell, and I recognize the envelope would have to be completely taken down. If we go from a renovation of West Amwell to a demolition of West Amwell and a complete rebuild, we do not get state funds. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. So let me ask you this. With the space, let's say it's a parking lot, we're super creative because we're incredibly smart people, we can do this. Let's say we figure out a way to put parking lots and playgrounds over the septic. I think it would be valuable to community buy-in to vet that option out. I think it will be a hard sell from the members of this community who will undoubtedly ask me, because they know I've attended board meetings for 5 years. This is like fun for me. They will ask me, what do you think? What's going on? Like, what do you know about this? And when they say, did they vet out West Amwell? I'd like to be able to say yes. And here's why we can't do it, or here are the obstacles. Because if we can find a way, in a conceivably logical way, because otherwise it wouldn't have been presented, to put a 3-story building on LPS property, on the Ely Field property, I think people would want to know, well, could we do the same at West Amwell? Could we be creative with where the parking lots and playgrounds and whatever else go and put the combined school on that site? Because it'll be hard to sell that we didn't go through that part of the experience. So that's my first comment, kind of question. the second is, last week, I specifically said to you, Tony, what do you think is our best option? And tonight you said, I like the plan we have in front of me. Can you, just for clarification, specify what part of the plan it is that you really love? What is the design of our district that you can visualize as having the academic excellence that we're all after?
Couple things. I think that, so here's the first part. I weigh on like what can the communities get behind? I think the communities can get behind a K4 and a 5-8 building. I think it does a lot of different things. Number one, fiscally, it will save us money in our annual budget because we will be able to combine sections. One of the things I heard loud and clear from several meetings in the beginning was, we don't have enough space at the high school. We're not doing enough innovative things at the high school. We're not attracting, students to stay in our district. Well, I have a lot of ideas about that. And I've had a lot of conversations with our administrative team of things we would want to try to do in the next 3 or 4 years to kind of change that story. But in order to do that, we are going to need to be able to utilize and reconfigure some spaces there. I don't think that can necessarily happen with the 7th and the 8th graders in the building right now. So the 5-8 building allows us to be able to do that and create more space so we can hit all 3 buildings or all 3 levels, not just, 1 level or 2 levels. I think and I've said this before, I think it's important for a variety of different reasons to keep a school in Lambertville. And one of the reasons why is I've been having a lot of Zoom meetings as of late with some of our Spanish speaking folks, some of the challenges they have, and as far as engagement in the schools and what it would mean to not have any school options there, as far as folks that don't have access to drive and participate in school events. And, they have shared some concerns about one of the things they enjoy right now in their community is having the ability to walk to school for a meeting and also have someone, quite honestly, that they have the ability to go to ask questions who can translate for them, that they have on a daily basis about all the various things that are going on in our district. And that's someone they can walk to and ask. And they were concerned about, if I don't have that option, how will I ever find out information about what's going on in the district? So,
Well, can I ask a question about that? And this is something, I want to be very clear. You and I have not had the privilege of really meeting and talking, but I wear my heart on my sleeve. Like I want to do nothing but serve social services and serve social justice. And, but I have to say, like at some point, these are conversations that we need to have with social workers and the child study team and work with the town and work with the county to build better social systems into place. Because I hear you and I agree. I mean, I'm not going to say no to a school in Lambertville if it's the right reason that's serving our people. And all of these people we're talking about are our people, and I'm with that. But again, we have resources. We're a small, clever community, and we can navigate that if it's in the academic best interest of all of us. And I believe me, I'll drive and pick them up. That's where I stand on this. But I just want to keep driving that we are a regional district and we have a lot of people at play. Again, I mentioned earlier the folks in our communities, who have fixed incomes, right? Like that's also something that has to be put into play here. So can we identify with social workers, with different support systems, how to solve these problems while maintaining the equity that we've been talking about for all of us? And again, I mean it when I say I don't mean to be callous towards individuals' needs, but let's actually highlight them and support and solve those problems to the betterment of the whole community, because we are that good community. We will support each other. We will take care of one another when we understand the need. And I think you'll see quite a bit of that from your survey whenever that comes out. But, I don't envy you. Just say that.
And then the second part I'll just share too is like, what I like about the 5-8 model is that, and I'm full disclosure, like when we talk about the best educational experiences for our kids, I don't know if they're necessarily getting that with our current setup. Like 6th graders should have access to science labs. They should have access to creative, teaching spaces to do things and explore with electives. And right now we don't have that opportunity. And I think 5th graders should as well. So like being able to provide that with a new building, along with space for activities, for extracurricular activities outside and different things, that's exciting to me, you know? So, I mean, it's a combination. It's, the facilities are important, don't get me wrong.
Mhm.
You know, everyone wants to have a good feeling when they walk in the building every morning, whether it's kids and staff. And then the second part of that, quite honestly, is the instruction, right? You could have the best facilities in the world. We need to have great instruction too. And we have great teachers, and I've already, you know, had the opportunity, you know, in my first 7, 8 months to, you know, work with a lot of them and see them in action. We got people that are great and dedicated. So, you know, we just got to kind of put all that together and then have those opportunities for our kids to really, you know, make ourselves an incredible, attractive place for people to want to come to school. So we're not losing kids to
Agreed.
other programs.
Agreed. And I think that's where we have to start, you know, as we get closer to this, start really highlighting the value proposition of this model. Because it's a great model, but it's one that as a community, we're wholly unfamiliar with, right? Like we are Little West Amwell, and people couldn't believe when I told them I graduated from a school that was 7 through 12. Like that doesn't exist,
Yeah.
right? So that's where I say, as we do this, please just keep telling us your experience of why this is the best way to go. Keep highlighting, because we do have to get this passed. I don't want it to have to wait, you know, past this particular election, past this mayoral election, past board elections. I don't want it to be a political game. I want it to be a game that serves our kids.
I agree.
So anyway, that's it for now.
Thank
We'll see
you.
if I pop in again later.
Dave, come on, go ahead.
Yep, there you go. I got muted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Cool. Okay. For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm from West Amwell, and I'm a parent of former kids at West Amwell and South. My kids were at school when you were there, Michaela, as well. Anyways, I've been involved in schools since the early 1990s, and I don't really have a question, but I just want to share a voice of optimism and confidence, because many have expressed concern or had questions about what happens if the referendum fails. I can just say from experience, past experience, of both the West Amwell renovation that was done in the late 90s and the high school renovations that were done in the early 2000s, I have confidence the district will arrive at a solution that will meet the needs to deliver quality education for our students in the 21st century. I can tell you that both those referendums failed on first try, but eventually through diligence and careful crafting adjustments and through better engagement and communication with all community members, including parents, former and non-parent taxpayers, the communities eventually came together overwhelmingly and supported the educational needs of our districts. And I believe that'll be the case this time. So don't get discouraged if, you know, if it does fail or looks like it might fail, you'll get what you need, believe me. So thank you. That's all I had to say.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for sharing that voice of reason there and some experience. We'll go back to Jen. Go ahead.
I just really quickly wanted to share a conversation I had with my daughter tonight, because it's relevant to the whole school model thing. And I don't talk to my kids at all about these kinds of things. So this was 150% completely out of nowhere. She happened to make this comment to me today, because she's a fifth grader, and she was saying how she's glad, you know, fifth grade and sixth grade feels really good. And every night we drive by the high school, and she's like, I can't believe I'm going to be up there so soon. You know, she's kind of reflecting on her time at West Amwell, and her comment specifically to me was, I'm excited about going to high school, but Mommy, I can't imagine that I'm gonna have to start all over again and be the lowest man on the totem pole. She said those words to me, and I was like, oh yeah, it's gonna happen. Fifth and sixth grade, we're I forget the word she used. We're at the leader or whatever of the school, and I'm really nervous about The only thing I don't look forward to about going to South is having to start over again and be at the low end of the totem pole. And that was real unsolicited feedback from my my fifth grader. And she has great social connections. She's got a really good group of friends. She's well adjusted. She'll be fine. I have no concerns about her. But I just wanted to make that statement that my fifth grader had those concerns, and she'll be fine. And it does make me worry about other kids who have to move through that. And I do know that it's not tragic. It wouldn't be awful. But I do really, I love either the model we have now, the K to 6 or K to 8, where we really only have to transition the kids just once. And I just want to make sure that as you listen to personal stories from people and gather feedback, that was a real, honest, unsolicited comment from my daughter. And I wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And what I'll say, so one of the things, and I didn't bring it up before, but I really have been immersing myself, because I know, Rebecca had brought up in the past the research. What does the research say? So here's what I'll say. I've looked at a lot of research studies, and one in particular that I've been focusing on over the weekend was from 2018. And it's as I kind of predicted, it is a bit all over the place. And part of what it was summarized is that a lot of the studies are inconclusive to say, what is the best configuration that you should have as far as schools. But the one thing that emerged about all of it was about what are you doing for transitions? So, and I think that kind of goes back to your point, Jen. So like students are going to feel that way. I think it's really important that we have strong transition programs for our students. So we ease that burden as they train, no matter what setup we have. It's really important for us that we have, and that's what the recommendation was, that your configurations can be dictated by a lot of different things. If you really want to dig into the student achievement and all that, a lot of the studies and the research that they've looked at are kind of inconclusive. There is some, reasoning out there that talks a little bit about, obviously what Jen said, maybe less transition with K8, but really it was tough where there wasn't anything conclusive. But the overarching was you need to have solid transition. So your transition programs really need to be top notch. And that's what's really going to, reduce any, as we call regression, when you transition from one level to the next. If you kind of just throw your kids into the mix and there's not really a thought process of, and that doesn't start like, when school starts, that starts literally the spring before they even come through the doors, and what that kind of all looks like through the summer and then eventually in the fall and during that first year. You need to have solid transition programs to prevent that. All right. Let's see if anybody else. Lindsay. Or that may not be Lindsay, is it?
No, it's not, Tony. Sorry. Unfortunately for you, it's me again.
No, it's all right. I remembered it wasn't Lindsay, but I forgot who it was.
Come on, you should have me on like speed dial by now. You should know what you're getting when you're calling that in. Now, so I just wanted to bring something up, and I don't mean this to be an attack at you, but actually this thought came from my wife, came from Lindsay. But this whole concept that I keep hearing is a recurring theme of, one of the main concepts behind keeping a school in Lambertville is the fact that there's so many people. Like that's how it's kind of pitched and presented. There's so many people that can't drive, they don't have vehicles, this, that, and the other. And that's one of the main focuses behind why this school needs to remain in Lambertville. The walkability, all that stuff. So it's interesting when we all know that eventually, inevitably, it's a combined district. They're going to go to South. So to think that magically, all of a sudden, people that have students at South in 7th through 12th, then all of a sudden they all in one fell swoop get vehicles and can magically drive again is, it's just kind of silly. So going back to the whole idea of making this a solution that makes sense and getting the taxpayers to vote this through via the referendum. Just, I would just encourage the board, don't, and I'm not suggesting that you necessarily are, but don't play people as fools. I mean, people are going to look right through those kinds of things and those emotional ploys, and tugging on heartstrings, and really seeing right through that kind of thing. These folks I've seen, I don't know their specific situations, and there probably are folks that go through times where they don't have transportation. And going back to what Michaela was saying through the questionnaire and the survey, if there indeed are folks that literally do not have transportation, then maybe we come up with some sort of a creative solution to solve for that. But in this day and age, I mean, folks have to work. I mean, there's got to be some mode of transportation. I just think that it's not a great look to keep harping on this point as a determinant factor in what inevitably is to be. I mean, for me, I don't care if it's a combined school. I don't care if it's separate schools that get renovated in their current positions and locations. I think that Colette made a lot of very valid points in moving things around, relocating play areas, parking lots, whatever, building up. I don't know, but I do believe that with that 40% amount coming from the state for assistance, that certainly is going to offset a lot of costs. And even if there is the need to have a temporary, just one-time transactional cost for the portable units for the transition period at West Amwell, I mean, it's a one-time transaction. Bottom line is whatever makes the most sense financially that still is going to solve for all the academic needs to bring us leaps and bounds, decades and more than even current for the needs of a solid educational program. That's really all that needs to take place. Like, just give people the facts, leave the feelings alone, leave all the emotions out of it, and just bring to the board what makes the most sense financially. It's going to cost us money. Don't play around with the tax dollars, because there's, in my opinion, I think a relatively small but extremely vocal voice in Lambertville with the Save Lambertville School and whatever that seemingly politically motivated organization is. Leave all that stuff aside. Just focus on the facts, focus on what's right, focus what's true, and present that to the tax base. And that's how you're going to get this through. And I do appreciate the wisdom of the gentleman that spoke earlier and just going through the past decades and things like that. I think he's absolutely right. We'll get to the right conclusion, but there's no sense in just going through this tumultuous battle when we can do all this stuff from at the very outset of things. Just bring the best solution to the board. The bias of the board is obviously a completely different conversation, and hopefully we can work through that. But yeah, just keep it simple. Don't overthink it. Think through it thoughtfully. And I do think that you have the best interest of the entire district in mind. I think that's pretty clear, and I appreciate that compassion that you have for really trying to listen to all sides. But again, just in summary, bring the best solution, the best financial solution that works for all folks across the board, no matter what it is. If it's the renovations, if it's one new school, one combined, it doesn't matter. But people are intelligent, and people are going to see through, I think, very very thin kind of propositions. So to get this through, I think there needs to really be some substantive evidence to get this thing through. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thanks.
And I promise you won't hear from me again tonight.
That's all right. Shannon, go ahead.
Hello, how's it going?
How are you?
Good, thanks. I just thought of a couple of things as some of the conversations were coming up. One, I just wanted to point out that the transition that you referenced about increased increasing the work we do with that. I know has been an ongoing thing that we've done the last couple of years with the professional development committee. So I just wanted to speak that regardless of what the school situation is going to be, the district's been working on that as a goal. I also wondered, I'm hearing a lot of people talking about potential options on building on top of the septic. I find it unlikely to believe that much would be allowed to be put there, but I also wondered how old that septic is, if that would have to be replaced. I just had to replace the septic at my house. It was $50,000 for a 3-bedroom house. So I can't even imagine what that would cost for a building like a school, but I just wanted to see if maybe you could speak to that as another either barrier or not a barrier in that option. And then I also just wanted to say, as far as the comment about, you know, the students once they're at the high school have parents who still can't drive, why is it different? I personally think that parental involvement is usually higher at the elementary level. We need to have them in the building for things like the parent-teacher conferences. They come to all of the assemblies and the productions that we do and that sort of thing. And also that a 5-year-old can't, you know, tell their parents necessarily what's going on in the building, but when they drive by and they see it on our signs and they know what's happening, you know, they can come in and ask those kinds of questions. And it's different when you have students who are able to advocate for themselves versus elementary age students who can't necessarily do that. So I just wanted to speak to that point too. So thanks,
you. And I'll answer your question. So if we were going to do like a full reno or even a new building on that West Amwell site, we would have to do a new septic more than likely. It wouldn't make any sense. I believe that septic is somewhere between 25 and 30 years old. So obviously, you know, to invest all that money in that site and then not to do a new septic wouldn't really make sense. And then, you know, 5 years down the road, we have issues. So we would probably have to do a new septic. What that would cost, I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
Sarah. Go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry about that. I was just trying to find my unmute. On the West Amwell site, do you know, or can you tell us, you know, we've been talking about renovation potentially for that site. What changes West Amwell from a reno to a knockdown? Like, I know sometimes it's you have to keep so many support walls and then you can build around that. Or is there a percentage of, like, once we start getting into it, is there a percentage of the building that, you know, they go, well, this is no longer a renovation, it's now a demolition? Do we know that?
I don't know it off the top of my head. I would imagine that we would have to keep some parts of the structure consistent. You know, obviously, if we didn't have any structure that was standing, that wouldn't qualify, but I probably would have to get more clarification from the Department of Education as to what, you know, they determine as a complete demolition compared to a renovation.
Yeah, it was just an interesting thought that I had there. I just wasn't sure if we already knew that or if we could find that out. Because, you know, if we're talking about potentially throwing that on there for a reno, that would come into play.
Yep, I can find that out. I'll research that and try to figure it out. Writing that down. Rebecca.
So I was thinking on some comments that people had made, and it seems like although we maybe feel like there aren't a lot of options, we do potentially have spaces and options that are available to us. And I suspect in conversations with people in the community, both parents and non-parents in the community, it sort of feels like right now we are being asked to support a plan without having explored other options to be able to do sort of a compare and contrast. So I think a lot of us, like, sort of when we go on Amazon at the bottom of whatever we're looking at, it says you may also like these options, and lets us compare and contrast like the weight or the battery or whatever it may be for the product. And I get the impression from listening to comments that there's a lot of us who say, you know, okay, this is one option, Reno, LPS, build the 5 to 8, expand into the high school space. But before I get behind that and can support that to the people in my community or support it myself, I would like to know comparatively, like, okay, if we did a combined K to 6 on whatever site, this is what the cost would be and this is what it would look like. If we did a K to 8, this is what the cost would be and this is what it would look like. And then collectively the community can say, okay, well, now that I've compared my 4 choices, yeah, this plan makes the most sense because it gives us the most, it's price point wise, the most sense, etc. And I just wonder, I mean, I know that it's 20 days out, if some of that could be explored prior to that board meeting on the 22nd, so that when you're asking us to support it or fill out a survey or whatnot, I feel like I have an informed choice. Because I mean, when I go and buy a car, I compare 6 different choices. And I feel like the place where my first grader is going to go to school for the next however many years, I want more knowledge about what I'm actually opting into, because that's going to be what I pay in taxes for the next 30 years. But it's also what I'm expecting my family members who live in the community to invest into my kids' future, or friends to invest into my kids' future. And I feel like it's an easier sell if we can, like Michaela said, say, okay, well, this is why West Amwell isn't an option. This is why a K to 8 isn't an option. So that if you were able to kind of give us that chart and water it down for us so it makes sense, then it's easier to sort of digest. We're going to spend $30 million and that's going to be renovating Lambertville. And that's why renovating Lambertville makes more sense than renovating West Amwell or building one big property on 518.
So, I mean, I do plan on vetting out the K-8 as far as cost and impact on the taxpayer for March 22nd. I'm just being honest, I don't plan on showing renderings of it, because at the same time, while we're going through all this process, I also don't, you know, I'm keeping in mind budget, and obviously that's cost. But I do plan on vetting out exactly what a price tag would be for a K-8 building and what type of impact that would have on the taxpayer. The other piece that I'll say to that is some of the things that you asked for. I mean, and I'm just full disclosure, didn't we already do that? I mean, when I look at the McKissick and all the stuff that was done and the 10 different options, and that's my fear. Like, I don't want to, I mean, time is of the essence, and not that I want to rush on it, but by the same token, we kind of did that already for 3 years. So, and maybe some of you were
Tony,
part
I
of those
acknowledge that we
conversations.
did that for 3 years, but I think
that?
part of it is for the past, I mean, for those of us who have lived here forever and ever and ever, we have consistently been told like a reno on LPS is out of the question. That cannot be done. That is not a viable solution. And so we've sort of been conditioned that if somebody says, well, let's renovate LPS, we all collectively go, no, that's not an option. So then for suddenly that to be our best viable option, I think it then calls into question the other things that have been framed out for us over the years in making informed decisions. And I think for many people, that's the sticking point with this is Lambertville was consistently told to us as like, no, this is a no-go. So then when we throw it back into the mix, it seems confusing or impulsive. And I know that this is not an impulsive decision, but that's perceptually, I think, how a lot of the community is going to perceive it.
Yeah, I mean, but at the end of the day, the reality is I'm going to need to make a recommendation to the board, and then the community is going to speak for itself. And either they're going to support it, and if they're not comfortable for what we presented, they're not going to support it. You know, my goal would be at the March meeting that, you know, obviously we'll show what that looks like and what we can do with a renovation. And then perhaps folks that were leery about it, who had been told in the past that it could never be done, you know, maybe that's a convincing factor. I don't know. So I mean but I will definitely vet out the K-8 option for the March 22nd meeting. So that will be part of the presentation. Colette. Colette? Colette? All right, we'll go back to Michaela.
Me again. So I wanted to chime in with Rebecca in this perspective, and I'm all about the solution here, right? So I feel like, and I'm going to call this out, and I'm going to be pretty candid for me, if you will. But it was a bit of a slap in the face to all of the sudden, to her point, after several years of hearing about the lack of viability of renovating these schools. And to be fair, I'm speaking of former administrations, former boards, former everything, who probably had their own positions and perspectives and agendas. But it's very hard to swallow that a month and a half or 5 weeks ago on January 25th, LPS completely off the table. And perception, if we're going to talk optics here, right? A small group of people rises up, they're frustrated, they don't like this. So now we're talking equity. So we're going to put these schools into places that don't really make sense. And again, I'm talking about perspective, not necessarily truth. And then 2 weeks later, surprise, guess what? LPS is totally viable. It's our best option and it's where we need to go. And while I know that that's not the conversation, when we talk about community perception and the demand and the need for this referendum, the right referendum to be passed, it's going to be hard for us as advocates of the board, because we wouldn't be here if we didn't believe in these conversations and these gatherings and opportunities. It's gonna be very hard to push for that when people say, well, why are we renovating LPS now that, a group of people really, really want it? So I think it would be important, to my point earlier, even if we know, listen, there are 5 board members that sit for LPS, that sit for Lambertville, excuse me, and we know their positions. They've been pretty clear about it. So we know that there's an opposition there. We've got to speak up and say, hold on, Braden, sorry, it's bedtime. And just to be able to speak up and really trying to form my thoughts and be right here. We need a good quality school of excellence to pass. And we know our people, we know our constituents, we're going to find out what's important to them. But to flip the script and to all of the sudden have viability for LPS, to then say in the same conversation, there's no viability for West Amwell, I think that's a tough pill to swallow, right? Because it makes us shake our heads and go, wait a minute, well, why was LPS not okay? And now it suddenly is okay. Let's look further at West Amwell. I think vetting that out is important, because we really have to be in this for the next 30-year game, not just right now. I'll leave it at
Here's
that.
what I'll say to that. And I'm going to be 100% transparent. And hopefully you figured this out already. Like, first of all, throughout my entire transition into the district, not once has anyone come to me on the board and said, this is what we need to do with our facilities. That hasn't happened. I'm just being, and I know what you've heard and what happened and everything that goes along with that. But the reality is that no one has done that to me. I have made these own conclusions. I've brought these own proposals forward. And I think right now it is important, and I'm just being honest, for a lot of the reasons that I spelled out, that we at least give a chance with a referendum to keep some capacity of a school in Lambertville. And some folks may not want to hear that, right? And some folks may not understand that. But based on my experience and what I've seen in the district and some of the population that we're servicing in the district and how we're trying to engage that population, I think that's important. And I think the plan that I put out right now, I think is a good one and satisfies that need, as well as the needs of other parts of our communities. Now, if the folks and the taxpayers don't agree with that, if we get to that point, then so be it. Then I need to take a step back and reevaluate and figure out, okay, where do we go from here on a plan that maybe they would get behind? but I think that we need to give it a chance. I really do. I'm just being straight up honest with you. I think that that's important to me right now based on what I've seen in the first 8 months. So I don't want you to think people are pulling the strings behind the scenes, and that's not what it's about at all. That's not the way I operate. I come in, I assess the situation, I get an idea of not just with facilities, but the whole entire picture of how we're engaging kids, how we're engaging families, where are our gaps, what does that kind of look like? And then from there is where I came up with my conclusions. As far as the pivot in January, I really felt strongly that, that was a good solid plan, but honestly, the community support and the concerns with the site were really a challenge. And that's why I pivoted to say, all right, it doesn't seem like that's going to sell, right? I still feel strongly about trying to keep a school in some capacity in Lambertville, no matter what the configuration is. So how can I try to make that happen? And what would that look like? And that's why I went back to, all right, well, let me change the rules now. The renovation would have been a challenge keeping that building as a pre-K 6 because I can't pick up space. How am I going to make that happen? There's no way I can make that happen. All right, well, if I go back to a reconfiguration and I move some grade levels out, it could be viable. So I want to investigate it and let my architects put their pencil to the paper and let's see what it would look like. And let's see how much it would cost. And at the same time, also identify based on the other feedback that I received about concerns with high school space and competitiveness of our high school and all those different pieces. So that's why we are where we are today. It's not with anyone behind me as far as politics, this, that, and the other. At the end of the day, I'm going to put a recommendation to the board and they're either going to support it or not going to support it. And then it's going to go out to the voters if they do support it, and they're either going to support it or not support it. And if they don't, then I will have to figure out where do we go from there. That's kind of where I stand right now.
So I gotta say, I thank you so much for that because as I said last week, I trust you. I trust how you've handled so many things up until, it blows my mind we're only talking about 8 months here. But I think the more you can continue to say that and drive home that this is your initiative, this is your position, because we do, let's face it, our country is politically divided. Our community right now is inherently, it seems, politically, socially, educationally divided. You name it, we're divided as a group. We have spent the last, 50 weeks in a quasi quarantine and everyone's heightened. So I love to hear you say these things of, this is what I believe, this is why I believe it, this is where it comes from. And it sounds to me like you're taking a 3,000 foot view instead of walking the streets, right? You're looking above and saying, this is what is right, and here's why I believe it. And if it were me, in my experience, I would say, continue to say that. Continue to drive home this message of, I am coming to this position because of my experience, my belief, what I feel to be is in line with my educational philosophy. Because we are divided and we have people with agendas, because let's face it, anyone that volunteers for things has an agenda, right? We can't deny that. But it's important, as you've just done, to separate yourself from that and drive to the educational value. And that is very reassuring. And I thank you for taking the time to highlight that. Because we need that. What we need is just the hard facts, get really to the truth of the matter and forget about the rest of the nonsense and do what's right for these kids. And I see you, I've watched you for hours sit in that chair, bobbing your head and taking notes and trying. And I don't know how you don't scowl and frown and cringe when some of us, get to cranking, but you're here for the right reasons. And the more you tell us that, as silly as it sounds, I think the more ownership you'll get over this mindset and the opportunity for a referendum.
Thank you. Michael.
Hey again, sorry, I just keep showing up.
That's all right.
But it's actually to that point that I actually just wanted to talk and kind of echo a little bit of what Michaela was saying. And one, it's that you are showing up. You are actively in a conversation, and you are, you're walking a fine line. And I am, I give you a lot of credit for that. But I also do want to call out, West Amwell showed up tonight. If you look at the 39 people who were on this, we want to be part of the conversation. We actually, I think, want to engage in the conversation beyond just the 39 people in this Zoom room tonight. And I'd really love to find a vehicle outside of a board meeting where, and again, I emailed you about this earlier today, where people can see each other's faces. You'll notice every time I talk tonight, I turned on my camera. I think it's important. I think it's important that we all realize that we are humans who have opinions and feelings and values, and that as we are discussing these values, that maybe we aren't on a soapbox. And I want to thank, again, just you for showing up. And I want to thank every single person in West Amwell who showed up tonight. And I didn't see any Lambertville names in there. I'm not as familiar with them, but if there are Lambertville names out there, thank you for showing up. But I want to continue this conversation in a way that everybody is involved. And you have been an example of that. I just wish we could find some vehicles where we could get Lambertville stakeholders and West Amwell stakeholders together and maybe hash out some of this understanding without without the have a back and forth, I guess is the best way to say it. There's so much grandstanding and there's so much possibility, and we're gonna have to, like, again, I'm an advocate for the combined school, so I'm just gonna keep saying that. But I'm an advocate for the combined school because I'm an advocate for the combined district and that we all work together towards it. So that's all.
Thanks, Michael. Andrea.
Hello.
Hi.
Michael has inspired me to turn on my video. So thank you, Michael. But I have a lot of notes, so I'm going to be looking down instead of at you, and they're scribbles. So again, I appreciate all I'm hearing, especially because there are a lot of elementary parents here, which maybe your kids will outgrow this pace, but maybe you'll get to see some of it. The one point I want to make is that we've talked about, I'm a numbers person. I like to use both sides of my brain, but when it comes to finance and education, I think about the numbers and making it make sense. So one thing is we talked about the population goes down in the next couple of years. We saw that in the data you sent last week. Well, I screenshotted it and I analyzed it. So the next piece that I read today was that population again is going down, that this past year and there were 7% less births. And they thought with COVID, maybe they'd increase, well, it did decline, right? So they're seeing that as a continuous trend. So we should be assuming that we're gonna have this trend ahead of us, and that's something in our demographics I hope that the board looks at when making an educated decision on the future of our school. The other point would be, when talking about that, is I looked up the state average and we're about 20,000 per student to educate currently. The state's around 18. And I know that's like a gross number and there's a lot factored into that. And we are a small district and it will cost us more to educate a child. So, but putting that out there, when we're looking at these future numbers, we need to take that we should be within a range. And someone brought that up earlier. What is that right number? I think Jen Batchelor brought that up. Like, is there that golden number of where you're looking? And that should be very much a consideration. A few years back, there was a really, really great community interactive relationship with the school on figuring out the best solution. And I really do think that the school district was getting close, but there was tragedy in the world and there was a lot of security issues, and security came first. So that was kind of put to the table, and then transition of board and frankly, administration as well. So I applaud that you're here 8 months and that you're tackling this within your first year. I do personally feel like it is rushed, just because I do come to every board meeting, and I felt like in January, all of a sudden it was like, oh, and we're going to put a referendum out there, and maybe it's out there on Facebook and I just don't know. But the fact is that to the community, if they're not on Facebook, if they're not going to a school board meeting, they still to this day may not know about this. Now, I know that Lambertville, it's a sanctuary, that school. It should still be a financial decision for the whole district and be a thought out process. I'm not against it, but I'm not for it, because I want to see what someone had said, give us option A, B, C. A being what you want, or intending to, try and put forward, but B, showing both renovations. Colette mentioned being creative. Maybe it's on the parking lot. We're building a school. We have, we own that big piece of property. That house in front of it was bought. So there are areas that we can consider moving the school up forward, and maybe you're tackling it section by section. I don't know when you have a state renovation funding, if it's an expiration date, like how many years you need to utilize that. But East Amwell, for instance, it took them years to build their wing. And they had, so we should be really looking to our neighbors within the county on what they do. And regarding the county, just as an FYI, if you're not familiar with Flemington, the elementary school is not in Flemington. So it is not a walking district to the elementary school. Everybody is bused, and there are 5 of them. So that's something to consider, that right within our own county, we have kids from all socioeconomic areas that have cars, don't have cars, if that's the conversation, and they adjust. Kids are remarkable. They will adjust as long as the right opportunity is put in front of them. Riding that bus when you're in kindergarten is like the best experience ever. Going through school, I was in 5th grade. I was going into 5th grade. I thought I was going to the middle school, and they changed it on us that year. And I thought my life was going to end. And guess what? It didn't. So my point is that kids are very fluid, and they will move with you. So we really should be giving people those expectations. But what you did mention, one other thing about our taxes being low. People move here in the county because they want to be in Hunterdon County, and they know that the taxes are low, and that's why one of the inspirations of why they move here. I know on my bill, 67% of my bill goes to our schools. I'd like to know what it would look like on option A, B, C, D. Again, it's not going to be a perfect number, but it should be something that everybody in the community is aware of. And that's how you're going to get support, really, by giving all this, because it is super fast to be coming up with something to go onto a referendum. And last but not least, this really it is a priority for our district. We really need to get there, but 50% of our kids are still not in school. And I bring that up only because we're talking about the middle school, high school building. And because I say it at each board meeting, we need to get these kids back. And that should be our focus of getting this community back together in school and being educated. And elementary, same thing, moving on to a longer day. Those are the kind of plans. I'm not going there, I know that, but that's part of our facilities. So we got to talk about that.
I have something to share with you. You will be getting an email tomorrow about the next step of our process. So we will be increasing instructional time. And I'll be sharing that in detail. You'll get that sometime tomorrow, that will share exactly what that will look like at our 12 and then pre-K 6. So obviously,
that's great. But it's all part of, that's our focus, getting these kids back in school. And when we talk about space and reconfiguring based on 21st century learning, we need to be utilizing every square foot of our space for our program, for our kids in our school, in our community. So I think we need to look at hard look on, what we get as a tax base, what we get as a revenue, and what are we costing our students in space by that revenue. And that's a hard conversation to have and nobody ever wants to talk about, but it needs to be talked about because I have not heard it once in the last several years. Since we became one district, actually, we've never talked about what the revenue does to our district, how it impacts us. And that's why I bring up how much it costs per student to educate our kids. I appreciate you and everybody's feedback tonight. It's great and I'll continue listening. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll go with Colette, our last one, since we just hit around 9 o'clock.
I'm sorry, when you called on me before, I hung up rather than trying to find when I was trying to find the mute button.
Oh.
I just wanted to respond to two things that what I'd wanted to respond to was what Rebecca was saying, and I appreciate your response to Michaela. And then Andrea just chimed in and said that she felt like this felt a little bit rushed. And I would just like to address the perception that I think a lot of people in West Amwell and the community are feeling about what has taken place here. A little history. I lived in Lambertville for 15 years before my children started in West Amwell 5 years ago. So I have been immersed in both communities. My husband and I have had businesses. We are very enmeshed in this community on both sides. And so I can understand the arguments. I chose to move out of Lambertville right as my daughter was coming into elementary school. And I registered her in West Amwell after she was registered in Lambertville. Her walking to school did not make a difference in my choice. We were making choices as a family. I do appreciate that some people are invested in that. But I have to say that the concern is nobody is attacking your decisions. I think that you are coming up with a viable plan with information you have gathered. But you just stating that you're not going to put something in front of the board that you don't think will pass. And the board has stated that 5 of their members will not vote for something that takes the school out of Lambertville. That makes us suspicious that our primary goal is not to find the best educational solution for the district. It is a time crunch to propose something that we will put in front of our taxpayers. As a taxpayer and having many ties in this community, knowing people who've lived here their whole lives, I'm concerned about their tax base as much as I'm concerned about my children's education. So the suspicion coming from West Amwell after hearing that neither of our buildings were viable, however, the state will pay 40% for a renovation versus the cost of a new building. Tonight, a septic was brought up. If you're building a new K-8 building, you're putting a new septic in here. So the cost base of different things that are being angled here aren't really an argument that satisfies this concern. Lambertville, the actual location, has so many concerns as a site. It doesn't have any outdoor space. Busing will be an issue coming in there. All of those things, I think a lot of people in West Amwell are really able to overlook if we are going to combine and have a better education by going from 4 classrooms to 3 classrooms. We get that. But totally eliminating the other options in order to get this through for the referendum is what seems rushed and what I think a lot of people have concerns about why that is being rushed. And with the things that were stated at the board meetings by different board members and subsequent things that have been stated that refer to that kind of build the suspicion that we're not 100% based on this is the best education for the entire region. This is the best option. So that's why we are probably, a lot of West Amwell parents are on these calls expressing our opinions because we want to explore all those options. I was at the meeting 3 years ago when we first did this, and the walking was an option. And I just don't, to LPS, I don't want to be held hostage to, an idea that may not service the whole community. So if a school can be, I do like your K-4 in Lambertville. I am concerned about the busing. I'm concerned about the playground. There are facility issues that are still a concern with that. But I would really like to know more about West Amwell, getting creative with that site.
So thanks. And then I'll just kind of end with this. It's important for me not only to put forward something that I think will pass, but even more importantly, I got to put forward something that I believe in. All right. That's the most important. So, please realize that that's my intention. When I put something to the board, it's something I believe in. And
Yeah, that was the point I wanted to get in the beginning. People are not, I don't think there is a consensus that you're not looking for the best overall plan. What I'm concerned about was the time and those other other things that came up
Yeah.
at the board meetings that seem to be setting a tone for where these decisions have to be made in order to get it through.
Understood. And what I'll say with time and feeling rushed, I mean, my concern is just as I came in and transitioned and, did the history of how long this has been talked about, I just know that, there is no easy fix where even if we go out in November, I know we're not going to reap the benefits for almost 4 years. So to me, when I take a step back, that's kind of mind boggling to say we're still going to be dealing with the same facility issues for the next 4 years, even if the referendum passed. Obviously, if we slow down the process and delay it, that's even longer. And that's what I'm just concerned about because I want our kids to reap benefits as quick as we possibly can. So my hope was that, there was a lot of information, maybe that's something I took for granted. There was a lot of information that was presented in the past. There's been years of studies and slide decks and all kinds of stuff. I really wanted to kind of come in, hit the ground running to a certain extent, assess where we are and get something on the referendum just so we can reap some of the benefits and not have to wait 5-6 years before we see some changes. So that was kind of my thought process in that.
So when would the next, if something didn't get put on this referendum, is it a 3-year cycle for the next one?
No. You can go out five different months out of the year. So we would probably have to wait. The earliest after November would be February. The only difference with the November referendum is because it's tied to an election, we don't have to pay for it. And typically a referendum could be anywhere between $35,000 and $40,000. So if we waited to go out until February, then that would be an additional cost that we would have to pay for it. So that was really some of the thought process as well.
One other point, someone was talking about, price comparison shopping. And if you want to get something that a taxpayer is going to get behind, if a new building costs $30 million and a renovation costs $10 million at 2 different schools, so total of 20, and then you're saving 40% from the state kicking in, then you have money left over to put into the high school. It sounds a whole lot. It just sounds so much better than an earlier caller said. It's going to be hard to get in front of the taxpayer and say, we want to renovate this building, we want to build a new one, and then we want to renovate the high school. It just seems more prudent to be taking advantage of the state money that's being provided for the renovations and really exploring that.
Understood. And just as a response to that, I would have a tough time putting forward a plan with that big of a discrepancy, just to be quite honest with you. If that truly was the discrepancy, I would have a tough time putting that plan forward of $10 million.
What do you, the discrepancy with, you mean the
Yeah,
cost
so
I
in
just
other
threw
words,
out
if,
there?
if a new building was 30 million and the renos were 20 and we could get for both buildings and we can get 40%.
Oh, no, I thought the package you were proposing with the LPS and the new school and the renovation of the high school came to around 30 million. And then didn't you say that the renovation of LPS would be around 10? Or you were just using that number as a rough number?
Yeah,
and
I
saying
just
the
used
state
it.
would
I don't
pick and
have
forth?
numbers yet for the 5-8 building or the LPS reno. I was just kind of using that to show as an example what the state would give us with the 40%.
Oh, okay. I was factoring that in. Okay.
Yeah, but I will. We'll have it.
Okay.
Anthony,
Okay. Thank you.
hi, Anthony. This is Joan.
Go ahead, Joan.
I have to say I don't follow all the school boards. This is Joan Young. I'm from West Stanwell, but I've been listening to the conversations for the last couple of meetings. One of my questions is, and I don't have a vested interest per se, that I don't have a child in an elementary school. And, after 8th grade, my children have gone out of district as well. So I'm just, but I have a history here.
Mm-hmm.
When people say that Lambertville people want to be walking to school. And you want a combined district. Has there been a traffic study or someone assessing what are the implications of all this additional traffic going into Lambertville, dropping in their kids, all the additional busing? I know personally, if I lived in Lambertville, which I don't, I would not want all that additional traffic and my child walking to school. I'm just saying this out of my personal logic. It seems to be a huge safety risk. Is that been addressed or thought of that implication?
Yeah, it has. So when we, and honestly, I never released it, but I actually have it and I could. When we were looking at the combined school as a possibility on Ely Field, we actually did do a traffic study. We had a engineer do a traffic study. So they did furnish a report, but then, you know, when that kind of got pulled off the table, it was never actually really presented. But with the K4 model that we're looking at in LPS, you're probably talking about a max of 3 buses where, you know, obviously when we were looking at a combined building down there, it would have been a lot more buses. So, so I think we probably could utilize some of that information from that traffic study based on, you know, this, you know, plan that's on the table right now, but we did have a, you know, a traffic study as part of that old plan.
And if you, does that traffic study have some sensitivity analysis that, okay, perhaps it's just 3 more buses and people are just, and all are busing. So in West Amwell, most people, I don't know what the stats are, live about a mile away. So it's not really that far. Same thing as if it going to Lambertville, but the bus line at West Amwell is huge. It's just easier. So that traffic study probably would only be relevant if it had this, if it had, okay, if everybody bused that wasn't in walking distance, and what would it be? Because that the more the reality will be, if West Amwell were to go into Lambertville, there'd be a lot of people driving. And it would be, unless that has that, right? So they really, from a safety standpoint, has to be considered.
Understood. Understood.
Does it did that study in fact?
We did factor in on average about how many parents drop off at West Amwell now currently, and that did get factored into the traffic study.
And that was a large percentage?
The principal estimated kind of tracking it. It was a little higher this year with COVID, but usually in the past, about 20 to 25 parents would drop off on a daily basis.
I would have to say that's probably not the reality. I mean, I had 3 kids going through there over probably a 10-year period. I think it's a lot higher. So really, I think that would have to, for this to be passed and for that to be a viable solution, that would have to be updated, I would think.
Agreed. All right, so thank you, everyone. I appreciate it for all your feedback. It was a great conversation over the last couple hours. Just a reminder, it was recorded, so I will be sharing it out with the community tomorrow, and then also updating it and putting it on our referendum page. So make sure you stay in connection with that page on the website, because all the presentations that I do will be there and there forever. So again, I appreciate your feedback, and stay tuned. More information to come. Have a great evening, everyone.